Good morning, Ohio State fans, and welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Thursday morning, September 4th. I'm joined by our fearless beat correspondent, Andy Anders. Andy just got done doing the weekly interviews in wake of the Texas-Ohio State game, looking ahead to Grambling State. How you doing today?
I'm doing really good, George, actually. Feeling got a workout in earlier, went to interviews afterward. You get that workout in before you turn in a bunch of work. You always feel a little more energized throughout the day. At least I do. Some people might be sleepy after a workout, but yeah, it's been a good day.
I have a lot of respect for anybody that can integrate a workout into their daily routine because I'm always exhausted after working. I've never understood how somebody says they have more energy after a workout and how they can work out in the morning. It's got to be the way I end my day if I do it, which is why I have all the respect in the world for the Ohio State football players that get up at 4 or 5 a.m. and go do the workouts before they got to go to practice during the day before the sun or during summer workouts and whatnot. So all the respect in the world of those guys. It's why there's an entire industry dedicated to covering their success and the things that they work for in terms of the results that they got, like the one against Texas last week. So uh, to that point, a lot of viewing interest in the game that just happened. To the tune of over 16.5 million people that tuned in to Fox and Big Noon Kickoff for that Ohio State 14-7 win over Texas. That was the most watched week one game in college football history, according to Fox, which is something that, Ohio State fans have kind of become accustomed to at this point, because that actually would serve as, I believe, the third biggest viewing audience ever, behind only for a regular season game, at least, behind only the two of the Ohio State Michigan games from the previous three seasons. Unfortunately, that also kind of reflects a trend that I believe all three of those games were at noon on Fox. And I wonder if that has just locked us even further into a fate of more big noon kickoffs. At the same time, I can't help but wonder, as much as big of a viewing audience as this was, could it have been even bigger if this had actually been a prime time game for Fox as opposed to noon? Obviously, Fox wants to prop up its own. You hesitate to call it prime time, but it's their version of prime time, in the sense that they've firmly established themselves as the go-to noon media entity in the sport. But at the end of the day, prime time is prime time. It's still, those 7:30 evening kickoffs, and that's when you imagine that most general, less hardcore fans are going to be more inclined to tune in to the sport of college football. Do you think, despite all of the viewing interest that is clearly delivering for Ohio State in this time slot, that it could be even more potentially lucrative if it were happening in these prime time spots on Saturday nights?
I think so. And this game had so much built-in viewing audience baked into it. Week one in and of itself, I think, when there's no NFL football going on, when people are starved for football, like it's been a long time since there were nationally televised games, and maybe you watched Farmageddon in week zero, maybe you watched the Thursday or Friday night games, but like nothing even close to the spectacle of the top 10 games that were playing out this weekend. And you combine that with two of the biggest brands. I mean, you talk top five built-in viewing audiences in the sport. Ohio State, Texas are in that top five. Like, I don't think anyone is a bigger draw than Ohio State, frankly, when it comes to TV viewership, when it comes to brand recognition. And Texas, like, I've always said Texas and Ohio are the two most football crazed states by capita. So this was always going to have a huge viewership number, regardless of what they could have played it at 3 a.m. It was always going to get a huge audience like that.
Don't
So,
tempt Fox with that idea. Noon's bad enough
no,
as it is.
big 3 a.m. kickoff. No. So Yes, I do think obviously anytime Fox gets these big viewership numbers on their noon kickoff, it is going to reinforce that directive, that objective from the company. And, we've talked about it a lot of times. This is Fox's strategy and it's worked for them from a business perspective. Whether you can debate the long term sustainability of it, but for now, they've gotten these numbers by having their biggest game of the week at noon while the other networks put their biggest game at later time slots. Do I think, and I'll apologize, my oven going off in the background. But these guys, these Fox execs, it's been their strategy. It's worked for them. I think it's going to continue to be the approach. And we Ohio State's locked into this contract until 2030. Now, I don't think it changes the fact that when this contract is up, or even like in the intermittents, Ohio State needs to throw its weight around to get these matchups at prime time. I mean, I do think even maybe competing with the night games, the prime time stuff that was on television, it could have drawn an even bigger number at prime time potentially. Um, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. That's how it's built with this current Fox contract. Is unfortunately Ohio State's biggest games are going to be at noon every year.
I know there was a lot of you. I mean, it was a season opener, but at the same time, I am still kind of just stunned at how this is the most viewed season opener ever. I know that it was billed as the biggest season opener ever, but then once that, and there's some people that would say the AP poll doesn't really matter now that the CFP rankings are really what determines the postseason trajectories in the sport. But it did feel like that the hype for this game took a little bit of a hit when we didn't get that number one versus number two billing that we were anticipating we were getting during the summer. I know that people were eager for the return of the sport. There's obviously a lot of built in viewing interest for the Saturday, given that it was going to be Lee Corso's final time doing game day. And that was even a big enough deal across the media landscape to where Fox dedicated the end of their show to actually showing Lee Corso's last headgear pick. So I think there was a lot of built-in interest for this game, but I'm still are were you surprised that this ended up being the most viewed season opener ever, or do you think it's just kind of a reflection of where the sport is right now in terms of general viewer interest and how important media has become generally, or I guess just the way that media numbers are accounted for across streaming and TV ratings at this point, that it's kind of baked into the cake that this kind of game at this moment in the sport's history would be the most viewed, and that it wouldn't necessarily be shocking if a year or two from now there's another maybe potentially Ohio State game or another game involving two teams with an audience the size of Ohio State's or Texas that breaks a viewership record like this. Were you surprised when you heard that number was as lofty as it was, or was that more the expectation given the hype that Fox put around this game?
I think it being the most viewed season opener ever, great accomplishment, but not a surprise to me, no. And I'm no expert on how streaming factors into everything. I think a lot less people are on cable now, so it kind of cancels out for me when I think about it, but, I'm not an
Well,
expert on
and
that.
sorry
I
to
would
interrupt you because I asked the question, but we had the whole conversation about or controversy rather about YouTube TV potentially not having the dispute with Fox and eating into the ratings before this, which I'm sure, even though they were able to work it out, probably scared off some people to a certain extent as well, or
yeah.
at least made it a bit hairier in terms of whether or not this was going to be as much of a success as people anticipated.
Right. Yeah, so definitely streaming has an impact on it. And for it to still be the number one most viewed season opener through that controversy does add another layer to it, maybe. They ultimately got it sorted out. And I just think the draw was bigger than that for this because yes, it was still number 1, number 2 in the coaches poll. The AP didn't play along and it ranked Ohio State number 3. But it was still like you look back at the history of season openers, it's very easy to make the argument that this is the biggest, most iconic season opener that's ever been played in college football. It's certainly among the most, the biggest, and again, the brands that are attracted to it. And I just think again that when you have two brands this big and it's two teams that are in the national title hunt that are top three in the sport right now, you have the noon slot where you're not competing with those other entities. And again, I think it could have done just as well at prime time, but there's a lot of factors that made this a candidate to be the most watched season opener of all time. So asking you if I'm surprised it achieved that, I'm not. And I think it just goes to show like how passionate both of those fan bases are, how big of a draw Ohio State is, Texas is, and that college football, the interest in college football really has never been higher. When you look at what the college football playoff has done for the sport, I think broadly, when you look at how big and in your face the media personalities can be, how big streaming has become, content around the sport has become. I really think that this is all a reflection of that, and I'll be interested to see if more TV viewership records are broken throughout the year, whether by Ohio State or elsewhere.
Well, so kind of along that line, then, last question, real quick.
Mhm.
They'll play, I believe, at Texas next season. The following season and the season after that one, they will have a home and home with Alabama. Do you anticipate any of those games potentially break? None of those are going to be season opener for either team the way that this game just was. But do you think, especially if Fox is getting involved in a noon kickoff scenario, or maybe because it's SEC, ESPN says no, you had your fun, and we're taking this one and we're putting it at night, and we're going to put the pressure on Ohio State to go on the road into Southern Territory and win the game. Would you anticipate? Let's say that either one of those at Texas or at Alabama games ends up being at night on ABC. Would you anticipate that one of those games ends up breaking the viewership number that Ohio State and Texas just had this past weekend?
It's a great question. I think they will be ABC because I believe the home team, like the TV networks associated with the home team, usually get those games. So I would expect it to be on ABC at night. Both of those. Unfortunate for Ohio State fans that they can't get their big games at night. It is what it is. Texas, Ohio State next year, I could absolutely see rivaling this number. Although, like I said, I think some of the interest from the non-Ohio State, non-Texas fan base, if you're just watching this game as a neutral college football observer, I think it being a season opener and you having been starved for football content might have played a role into achieving such a big number. So I can definitely see it, especially if there's more narratives built in about Ohio State and Texas. Maybe they meet again in the college football playoff, or they're just both in the national title hunt this year. If they both play to a similar standard they played in 2024 throughout the rest of this season, then it just keeps building for the next rematch in 2025. So a lot of trends there. For me, I don't know where Alabama's going to be as a program here in 2 years. They had a pretty bad loss. I mean, lost by 2 touchdowns, and it wasn't even really that close to Florida State this weekend. Um, that's so I think for me, if you're asking me to predict in 2 years if that's going to be as big of a game, I don't think it will because I don't think I'll say it now. The way it's trending, I don't think Kalen DeBoer is really working out. You talk about program fits. This is a whole separate conversation, of course, but I don't expect Alabama to be what Alabama was under Nick Saban in 2 years when they play Ohio State. So um, we'll see. I could be wrong on that point. They could turn it around, but that just didn't look like Alabama football against Florida State this weekend. And if that's the case, then in 2 years, I'm not sure I expect the program to have that much hype going into it. But it'll still be a big matchup that draws a lot of viewership, no doubt. Um, and again, two big brands, although I would say Alabama's fan base and audience and brand recognition maybe isn't to the same caliber as Texas, honestly. So I think next year could definitely rival those numbers. for me, Ohio State, Alabama in 2 years probably won't be as big as either this year's Ohio State, Texas or next year's Ohio State, Texas.
Well, careful dumping the cold water on the Alabama fan base just in terms of
Hey,
prestige,
they're
Andy.
dumping a
I
lot
don't
of
know if
cold
you
water on themselves right now. All right, I don't know if you've seen
I don't know if
Twitter.
you listened to the Paul Feinbaum show this
Oh,
week, but
yeah.
they've got their own lunatic fringe out there as much as people want to say Ohio State has one. So and maybe they'll inspire an uprising against Kalen DeBoer and pull Dabo Sweeney over from Clemson or something. And then suddenly that Ohio State Alabama game in a couple of years has a lot of juice. But yeah, it is an interesting question, albeit one, it's kind of difficult to speculate on something that's still, multiple years out relative to what just happened. But then again, it kind of speaks to, with all due respect to Grambling State, the fact that we're out here talking about games that are happening 2 or 3 years from now, as opposed to the one that's set up to happen this weekend, speaks to how confident we probably are all in the result to come. That being said, it's still just another thing to celebrate for Ohio State's success as a program that they were able to hit a mark like this against an opponent like Texas, not just in victory, but in terms of interest. Great way to start the title defense campaign. And yeah, something the program can hang its hat on as we prepare to go into a bit of a softer, I don't, or maybe soft isn't the right word, but certainly less intense portion of the schedule up until I think that game against Illinois next month. It's still over a month out from now is probably what their next biggest test is going to be. But uh, one game at a time. It's like Urban Meyer says, the best part about 1-0 is a chance to go 2-0, and they got to go 2-0 before they start worrying about Illinois. So we got that to look forward to this weekend. And yeah, we'll be back tomorrow on the 11 Dubcast with Dan Hope to preview a bit of the Grambling State game and try to get a sense of what to expect other than a win by a lot of touchdowns, ideally. But we'll see what Mr. Hope has to say about it. But Andy, thank you for joining me, and thank you for tuning into the 11 Dubcast. We'll be back tomorrow morning for the last show of the week. Take care, folks.